Introduce you to Tania Arwachan, who co-founded Scope Atelier in 2012, a Beirut-based design and branding lab, where she's been managing projects that span from brand identity creation to publication design, website creation, and signage system conception. So Tania graduated in 2005 from the American University of Beirut with a Bachelor in Fine Arts degree in graphic design. So I want to welcome our very own Tania.
It's actually a pleasure to be back here because the last time I sat here, I was a student. Actually, I was presenting my FYP, so here I am presenting a bit what I became after this FYP. So yes, I'm presenting the work of Scope Atelier, which is a company that I co-own. And as the name indicates it, we purposely co-founded an atelier that does design. Atelier is a workshop, so we really wanted to be hands-on in projects spanning different media. So we created that little lab with printing facilities, with binding facilities, and we actually got to learn how to make books, make some custom-made packaging. It's an experience that actually pushed us to probably design differently many kinds of design projects. So let's start with books. So we were happy to welcome some students to actually see how we bind books. Books have been a big part of the projects that we've been handling. Actually starting with a fast reflection that was made to us when we were students in the 2000s. Actually, David Carson did his book named The End of Print in 1995. The question is systematically asked whenever people talk about books, like, do people still design books? Do people still read books? Are books still existing? And the answer is, well, this is David Carson's answer a few years ago. He said, well, simply, when photography was perfected, we thought it would be the end of painting, but of course it wasn't. And the next reflection is simply bookshelves, coffee tables with books on them. We might all have those in our houses, and I don't think that we would put a Kindle as happily as we would put a nice book on a coffee table. So just showing you some books that we have designed. Well, the books that we chose to show you actually are mainly art books for one main reason, which is the capacity we have to experiment with such books, which we don't have with cookbooks, for example, where everything is budget-oriented, everything is more classical, if you want, in terms of reflection. And so this is an image of a book that has been designed and that's being produced, and it's specifically a book for Akram Zaatari. So first case study, if you want, that we're showing you is Akram Zaatari. You might know him. He's an artist, a conceptual artist, Lebanese, with whom we've been working for several years. He's the co-founder of the Arab Image Foundation. And since many years in his exhibitions, his many exhibitions around the world, he's been commissioning us to add up to his research with the Arab Image Foundation. So we created a book that is printed with every exhibition that he does. So the book is part of the exhibition. It's part of the exhibited artworks. We first started with a book that was quite thin, which was done in 3 volumes. This was the first exhibition. We continued with a book that became thicker, and that was that was a new standard in its production. This is the Korean version of that book. And then it became so thick that we actually had to move from a sleeve to an actual box to contain the book. This is one of the cases where really production was thought in tandem with design. We actually had to foresee how we would produce the book before we would go on with laying information down and designing the actual book. Second one is a book that we also did to accompany an exhibition which was held at Saleh Barakat Gallery a couple of years ago, which was about doing two sorts of limited edition art books. So these books were fully designed but mainly also produced in our premises. So what was important here, maybe more than just laying out images and type, was the choice of materials, was the reflection on the book itself as an object, not just as an InDesign file where we would simply arrange photos, type, etc. So there was a research on material, there was a research on types of binding, on the way to display the book in a box, and a reflection on how to do two series of limited edition, one that is limited enough to 60 copies, so an expensive, if you want, book, and one that is really considered as an art piece and that is limited to just 16 copies, in which we added to the binding some cedar wood, and that was printed on fine art paper, not just on nice paper. So it's a book where every page is considered as a tirage, an art piece of the artist. This is just to show you a bit the type of images that you have in that book, with some captions and some text that accompany the book. Now, something more interesting probably than just a book that is being designed and produced in the same premises is a book that is fully thought to go to print offset, because it's not just about printing and binding our own books, it's also about catering for the needs of people who would want to make many more copies of these books. So one thing that we're always keen on doing when we think about design and production in tandem is thinking how the material that we receive from an author, from a publisher, can hold within a book in a certain number of pages of folios. I guess you're familiar with folios, these 16 pages that are folded to make up one of the elements of the book. And thinking about folios, this is an example of a book where we changed paper many times, where we inserted, so where we used some uncoated paper, some coated paper, some calc paper, and some pages that are actually just shorter and inserted in there. There was a very long reflection that was done together with, in this case, an architect, Hala Wardi, was a quite renowned architect, Lebanese, what kind of information we would want to display, how to display it, so that we could create that play on paper. And we created actually prototypes that we then handled the printers who had enough information to be able to print offset and bind the books the way we wanted them to be. So just to give you a quick idea, it was a couple of exhibitions that were held at the same time. So the idea was to combine both exhibitions within one publication, but which had a double opening. So either you would open it from this side or from this side. You have it bound here and bound here. And within the information, we had some text information, technical information. We had some layering of information done on calc paper with poems and soundtracks that were represented visually in different forms, in different graphic ways. And we had some in situ photos. Those were printed on coated paper. We even had fold-ups that we would open within the book. So this part is really about book design and production in tandem, and in the three cases, and probably most particularly the last one, the reflection was very important on production. We really had to close the concept of the book, the changes of paper, the type of materials that you were using before we even started to design the project. Another example is packaging or box making. It's what we call in how do we call that actually, technically? It's not packaging as in labeling, it's packaging as box making. What we did for some of our clients is not simply design a box and think about it technically, think about how it would look technically, but actually prototype it in a way. For this project in particular, we probably seduced our client well enough to be able to handle the whole production. So this was done for a perfume bottle, a perfume brand. So we obviously started, like any project, with Photoshop simulations, with technical drawing, but we also sent and prototyped the actual box, which let us actually hire some more artisans within our workshop to handle the whole production of boxes. Here are some images of people at work repeatedly doing this box so that the client had his 4 collections of perfume boxes. This is a project for the Gulf regions. Had to be at that standard of leather and wood accents. A very fun project, which was done in collaboration with an architectural firm, actually Halawardi, whose books we've seen right before, is the scenography or the exhibition signage of, in this case, a Nan-Goldin exhibition in Stockholm, which was done a year ago. So Halawardi Architecture was in charge of creating the spaces for an exhibition of Nan-Goldin's short movies. It was about 6 spaces, and in those 6 spaces, production happened, but within very close and very intimate atmosphere. So these spaces being determined, we had to think about a system. So they were closed spaces with that material, that black material closing them. And we had to think about a way of displaying information, so an information signage system that would suit well the kind of material that would have the information that we need and that would not visually look weird within the spaces and with the materials used by the architect. So we prototyped several ideas of the signs themselves. We looked on how to do them technically because, so in that case, we thought about the production itself, and we gave guidelines to people in Stockholm who repeated that idea and who repeated that process for the final signage of the exhibition. So some reflection was conducted on how do we do the sewing, do we create a contrast between letters and this background, or do we use a thread that is the same color of the letters themselves? So here you have an example of a word lost with either contrast or no contrast. We also had a reflection on how to create the cartels, so how to print anything that had to be a text material. How could we add them on that material as well? A little question as well was a language that was dominant and a second language probably. So probably also cartels that differed in sizes that were printed silkscreen. And the end result done in Stockholm was what you see here. So the titles, the cartels, just the way we had them produced here in Lebanon in our premises with the guidelines we gave, they were reproduced in Stockholm. Another fun project was actually working on image production and props production for a movie. And that movie is Memory Box, Joanna Hajitoum Al-Khalil Jreg's Memory Box, which is a movie that had some awards a couple of years ago. So image production, well, this is something else, that this is less design meets production, but images were reproduced as if they were taken in the 80s. And the notebooks were created in our atelier based on the notebooks that Joanna Hajitouma, the author and the filmmaker of that movie, used to send her friend when she was a teenager. So we basically created scrapped books on notebooks that looked like these 80s notebooks, all the materials that was needed for that film, for that movie to be made, and that appeared quite often in the movie. I don't know if you know the movie, but if you want later on during the Q&As, we can go back to that very quickly. Last but not least, we were really happy to welcome a group of students from AUB, and we saw the potential that we had in showing the skills of our artisans, mainly Muhammad actually, who conducted the workshop. So showing a bit how we work with that little machine that we custom made ourselves, which is called the guitar. So for folio sewing, and students actually did their own experiments on the folio sewing. Some hardcovers as well. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, just 1 second. We'll be holding the Q&As. Any questions? If If not, I have one.
Yes, please go ahead.
You focus a lot on materiality and a lot of like care to the fine arts. I just wanted to know a little bit about that process of, do you work with people who are in fine arts as far as like...
Yes, I think that the fact that we, from the start, had this little atelier allowed us to target a lot of artists whom we either knew or who started coming to us. So we do handle a lot of art project, fine arts project, which is, I mean, it's probably the most rewarding kinds of projects. I mean, we also handle more corporate, more commercial projects, but the ones that we have most fun with, and the ones where we're able to explore most the materiality that we like working on, are projects done for artists, architects, designers.
Excuse me. On your website, it says you do branding and identity work.
Yes.
From what you showed us, it's mostly publication.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
does the branding side come?
I mean, you can see it in our website, but we don't, I mean, it's not what does our specificity as a design company. So our aim was for this presentation to focus on what's special about us. So we do have a lot of brand identity projects that come in that are actually probably the projects that allow us to have a team, a studio, an atelier to be financially stable. But the projects that are more particular and what's more specific about us is probably that type of project for which, if you want, having a workshop is an advantage.
So your clients would come to you because you have a workshop. They feel that you are in full control of the whole production, that you can experiment much more, because it's very hard for designers also to work with production companies outside of their own realm and give specificities. So
Exactly.
does this part happen with the client, or do you بتخيطوه سوا يعني؟
Actually, what you said is interesting, because I think that somehow the last part of your question is an answer to all that. So as designers with some experience, my business partner, Nadim Zablit, has much more experience than I used to have when we started. But as designers, we had that struggle with production companies, with printing companies, that did not necessarily understand what we had in mind. And the little workshop within our very first studio, which all in all was 100 square meters, so we were all packed in that very small space for a workshop, at least, because you need to be able to put machines, etc. The idea was by experimenting, to solve this. But we also knew that by having this, we would be able to also cater for the needs of people we knew as artists who also were struggling with that. So it was a bit both of this. Now, the example of packaging project that I showed you, we didn't necessarily had in mind using the atelier, but it came as a plus, which actually was a big plus. So it was first started as a brand identity project for a luxury product that was going to be launched in the Gulf countries, and we seized the opportunity to actually prototype the box and send the box that we had in mind to the client, which allowed us to get the full production. So it's both. First it was an answer to a need we had as designers, and to the need that many clients or many potential clients that we knew, artists mainly, some designers, had as well. And then we started seizing opportunities to suggest that approach, or to suggest our workshop to other kinds of clients.
So when you first started your studio, you started with a workshop directly?
We immediately had the workshop. we immediately had small machines, tiny machines, but we immediately wanted to really be hands-on in the project that we started.
Hi. I have a question. Maybe it's not directly related to your PowerPoint, but you said something about how, you mentioned your FYP, and was it somehow a starting point to what you're doing now? I'm just a bit interested.
Not really, because my FYP was probably more art-oriented than design-oriented. But there was a little part in my FYP. I did a photographic installation as an FYP and experimented a lot with photography actually, and not with design per se or materials per se. But there was a little part in it. At the end, I realized that I had to combine some information in a booklet, and I actually hand-sewed that booklet to be able to give it to some people. So somehow, maybe that was a starting point, but the FYP in general was not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Well, does it have to be with the mic? I can project. It's fine. Thank you, Tania, for the presentation. Yes, some really exciting projects that you guys showed us today. That's really great. So, full disclosure first, I just want to say that I know these guys from way back. We worked together, and actually Nadim is one of the people who I met earlier in my career, who taught me that production can be creative, even in that more classical context in which we were all working. What you showed actually is what's nice about it is that it really I think displays something that we preach a lot but don't do enough of, especially in design education. Think about the fact that we have to think about materiality, the fact that we have to think about production techniques inventively. Often more than not, the work ends when we send the file to the printer. So it's nice to see that there is actually effort being done around us, where the work not only begins when we send the file to the printer, but perhaps we start with that even before there's a file to send, right? So there's something nice about that. My question, but in all of your examples, you actually showed design and production sort of like intertwined. I wonder if the scenario where you get only a production project happens, and I guess my question is, can it still be as quote-unquote creative even in that more classical framing of you're handed a design file?
Yeah. Actually, yes, it's. I like your question, and we did that several times. Actually, Ahmad, we have had some projects that were only executed but not designed by us. Usually, what happens, and we did that mainly with 2 design studios.
Thank you. Okay. We did that mainly with 2 other design studios or 3 other design studios, is that we're handled files. We often realized that production was not thought at all and needed some thought. We brainstormed with our colleagues, so with other designers, and came up with solutions. And actually, the fact that some of them came to us with other projects showed also that their own reflection when handling the project had evolved, because I don't know, for some reason, some of them being really good designers did not at all think about materiality, or even sometimes know, in case of books, how page division worked, how they were printed in 16 bifolios of 16 pages. And in some cases, they didn't even know that they had to start with the right page, and they started documents with the left page in
Right.
the case
I
of
hope
Latin
that's not-
publication.
I hope that's not the standard.
No, it's not a standard, but it's often the case. But sometimes you receive files that are well designed, type well set, very nice reflection in the design itself, but you realize that there lacks an understanding of the object itself and the production itself. So we had to we tackled that sometimes with other designers, and we were happy to. I mean, it's always we always like that kind of collaborations where we're not just we don't just see other designers our competitors as competitors. It's really nice to be able to collaborate with people who do the same thing as you and who have maybe another kind of reflection, but at the end to meet in ideas, and in our case it's mostly ideas about how to produce this end project.
Hi, Tania. Thank you. It's so beautiful, the work you have shown. I have a question. I don't know if you talked about it, but I'm very curious about the relation with craft people. So how does your team? How did you constitute this team? How did you research people? Did you train? How did you learn from? What are the kind of crafts in the atelier? It seems you also manufacture your own machines. I think it's very fascinating because probably a lot of the handicaps that designers have to be hands-on is also because we're quite disconnected from the production process, right? Which is usually outsourced, and also taking risks means, it's the same way when you have to work with a jar, like you need to try, you don't know its recommendation. So I'm very curious if you could talk about this.
Yes, sure. I mean, Muhammad is here, and he could testify about how he became a really talented معلم in all of this. He was so Muhammad is the person who handles printing and binding in our atelier. And when we started with him, he used to work with leather, actually, with leather craft, but he learned everything about printing and everything about binding. He learned it from Nadim and I, who ourselves, I mean, I learned a lot from Nadim, who has much more experience than me. When we started, I did really learn a lot from him, and we actually ourselves went on workshops outside Lebanon in 2012. It was in Germany, to actually learn some binding technique, to see what kind of little machines were used in very small workshops, and that helped us create our own workshop. That helped us start being hands-on and push our techniques a bit more, and actually start experimenting with design projects that we were getting. So if you change a bit the way we used to simply design. And when Muhammad started with us, we gave him that know-how, and obviously it's been some 8 years that he's been doing that with us. Well, he's the master now. He's the one teaching us some things, some triggers. He's also the one who's involved with every problem solving in projects that we get.
I have a question. I was so taken by all of the binding and the physicality of it, and we have a lot of students who are doing publication. I'm wondering, aside from binding, how do you separate like bilingual text in a whole publication?
Okay, we've had that quite often. So in some cases we've had 3 languages. In some cases we've had 2 languages. The challenge is often on the English and Arabic, or French and Arabic, so Latin and Arabic. think it's really a case by case. Sometimes sometimes the project is more interesting to handle in 2 different publications. Sometimes it's much more interesting to have it in one. You might choose one side opening, a double side opening. I mean, it's really a case by case, and the way we decide on it is very often based on the type of information that you have in, whether the languages fit together or not, whether they have to appear close to each other or they could simply sandwich some, I don't know, third information. Sometimes it's based on the budget of the client. So it's really case by case. But yeah, we do handle very often actually in Lebanon some bilingual publications. So there are many possibilities. I think that Yara is the one who should give you the bazillion possibilities that you have. I think we've explored some 4 or 5 types of bilingual publications till now. Yeah.
All right. So some of us are graduating soon. So I wanted to ask if you could give us a little bit of advice on, after graduation, how do we take the first steps on reaching the point where we make our own company, let's say, as you had your a partner, a designer.
Yeah.
So do you think it was a good step to take towards this direction?
I think it was a good step to take after actually 6 years of being a designer in another company. My personal experience is that the first company I was a designer in was another school of design, and I know that I wouldn't have been able to start anything had I not been a designer in a design company. I really learned everything in there. So design skills, typographic skills, but also reflection on production and the premises of what we're doing now. So my advice would be to start by working with professionals. I think it's very important. And to try to not only be a designer, but then a senior designer in a company until you feel strong enough to open your own company or to start being a freelancer. But really don't hesitate to go to a design companies there. I mean, AUB is a great school, but some design companies are also great schools.
When a project comes, how do you guys usually tackle the project? How is it divided for the team?
It depends on the kind of project. So we often start project by a brainstorming. So very often Nadim and I sometimes and more we involve designers from the start of the project. And when it's books or when it's packaging, we systematically start by thinking about the production first, or at least in tandem with design. But if you want, we never finish files that have not been thought about as an object, as materials before.
Hello. The project of the 80s notebook, I loved it. Can you tell us more about it?
So it's a movie, I don't know if you guys have seen it, by Joanna Hajitouma and Khalil Jrej, which is called Memory Box. If you want the synopsis of that movie, so it's a lady and her daughter who live in Canada. The lady immigrated to Canada more than a decade before the movie, or actually a couple of decades before, in the 80s actually. And she receives a box which the daughter discovers, in which there are notebooks of her mom that were sorts of exchange letters with a friend of hers. And it's actually based on the own experience of Joanna Hajitouma, so the artist and filmmaker who did that movie. So the idea came from her own notebooks, and what we did is, I mean, it's really scrapbooking. It's something that you might do in basic design, probably not in the publication design course, but which was fun to do. And they're facsimiles, so we recreated notebooks. We recreated the covers of the notebooks, the way. The lining of the notebooks, the way they were bound, and with some text, some cutout photos, etc. And those appeared in the movies, in the movie, and they were an important part of the script and of the visuals of the movie.
One more question. Hi. When you're commissioned to do a project, what are the factors that make you decide whether you want to take part in this or not?
Many factors, actually. So one of them is interest in the project, if we're interested in it or not, if we have time for it or not, if we have the skills for it or not, or the capacity for it or not. So if we talk just pure production and not design, sometimes we don't. We know it's not the type of project that we can handle solely or without any other person intervening. But it's mainly interest, availability, and that's it mainly. And sometimes it's budget. It's can be as simple as that. I mean, if a client comes to you and asks you for a 6 months long project that is not well paid, as a company you might want to decline the offer.
But are there any times where even if the budget isn't enough, that the interest sort of overpowers?
Yeah. This happened. It happened many times. It happened during difficult times as well, COVID, the start of the crisis. So we did these concessions. We actually did many pro bono projects for people who were really affected either by the crisis or by COVID. But you know that you want to help these people. When it's a big corporation that comes telling you we have no budget, you might not have interest in doing that. When it's a very little company that was affected, for example, by the blast, we had a couple of such projects. We just offered our services.
Any more questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.